Okay, first of all, I want to say real quick, thank you to one of the people who follows me on Tumblr. At least I imagine they follow me. They most recently communicated with me over there through an anonymous ask. But I want to thank them for sending a donation to my coffee that let me buy this really cute shirt. It's a corgi done like in an impressionist painting style. You can't really see it because of the way I have my little setup here framed. You can't really see my t-shirts, which does kind of bum me out, but there's not really a better way to do it that I've been able to work out yet. That's why I've been wearing a lot of plain t-shirts lately instead of graphic ones, in case you guys were wondering. But yeah, that was really cool. And also I have a coffee, so send me money if you feel like it. The link will be in the description. Also, this is another show, just like Prime earlier this week, that I'm really happy to get back to. The Owl House is great, and I barely talked about it. And frankly, I didn't even remember how great it is until I went and rewatched this episode. It's very funny. It's a very funny show. And its humor is like just spot on my humor, which is fantastic. I don't know what this gesture was. I'm trying to figure it out. I have no idea, but you guys get to live with it now. That said, I did mention in my previous reviews that while this starts out as a very non-conventional fantasy story, it does slip into some fantasy story tropes. It still handles them well and, for the most part, differently than we tend to see elsewhere. But this is where that starts to happen, at least a little bit. Because this is the episode where we're introduced to Hexside, the local magic school, which Ida absolutely detests because, in her words, magic is wild, it's unstructured, you're not supposed to learn it in a school environment. And I get what they're doing here. I get that the whole wild magic versus academic magic thing is a commentary on the education system. I would assume particularly the American education system, which is a big fiery train wreck and has been for a very long time. Like, education in the United States is mainly handled by teaching to the test. There's a lot of busy work, a lot of just really grinding the students down, teaching them to perform menial and repetitive tasks more than actually teaching them things. And it's all capitalism's fault, because the idea when this particular schooling system was first implemented was that most of them were going to go and work in factories. So the idea was you teach them to be okay with working in factories, and you disguise it as an actual education. And it's stupid. And so while we're only really introduced to those themes here, that is something that's going to come into play in subtle ways. Like, they aren't very overt with it. I mean, they kind of are, but at the same time, they kind of aren't. But it's something we're going to get into in later episodes more than we do here, because this episode is more concerned with just kind of dipping our toes into the idea of Hexside, and also introducing a bunch of new characters. First of all, pretty soon after branching off from Ida and King, because she doesn't want to help them dig through the guts of a dead giant sea slug thing. I guess it wasn't actually a sea slug, was it? So it was killed by the saltwater. Giant slug thing that was killed by the sea. Luce encounters the best character in this show, period, Willow, who, and this is going to be kind of blasphemous, I think, because the character we're introduced to next is the character who the majority of the fandom, including myself, kind of ships with Luce. And I do think they make a cute couple, but man, I'd kind of like to see Luce and Willow end up together because they have such a cute dynamic too. Then again, Luce has two hands. So, you know, anything can happen. But yeah, we're introduced to Willow, who is giving herself a pep talk because she is convinced that she's going to fail her school assignment. She is a Hexside student in the Abomination track. Because in this world, academic magic, at least, is split into different tracks. The point is, apparently her parents think that the Abomination track offers better career opportunities down the line than the plant magic track, which is what she's good at and wants to be in. And I don't get that because the Abomination track is creating sludge monsters, which is cool, don't get me wrong. But the other one involves making plants grow, and plants are the ecosystem and also food. So I would imagine that one's more broadly important, but this is a pretty imperialistic society that these characters live in, so maybe being able to create soldiers out of goo is considered more important here. Actually, that kind of makes sense. That she's giving herself a pep talk because her abomination, well, it's an abomination. But we see she's naturally talented at plant magic. She's able to revive a dead flower, and then she, like, just kind of accidentally has, like, a big anime-esque explosion of energy that makes a giant plant sprout out of the ground randomly. And, like, she looks really impressive doing it. Like, it's clear this is supposed to be really high-level magic. Like, the contrast is obvious. And this is where we meet that other character I mentioned before, Amity. She's the top student in the Abomination program. And, like, it's hard to judge the two things against each other because they're very different. The Abomination stuff and the plant stuff is very different. But from my perspective, it seems like Willow is better at the plant magic than Amity is at the Abomination magic. It seems that Willow's plants are better than Amity's abominations. Which means that if Willow was in the right program, she'd be better as a student than Amity is. Or at least on par, right? So immediately you get the sense that things are wrong. That they should be drastically different. And it all happens without anybody literally saying that out loud. It all happens through dialogue cues and things that we're able to observe within the episode. We're able to see that even though the characters are also saying that Willow's abomination kind of sucks, that it literally does kind of suck. It's not good. It's obviously not good. So Amity harasses Willow about it a little bit, shows off her top student pin. She's very much a bullyish character at this point. She's going to grow into a more sympathetic character pretty much immediately after this, but right now she's definitely the antagonist of this episode as much as anybody is. But of course, and neither one of these characters is loose, and she has to be involved in the plot somehow because she is the main character. So she's been listening to all of this, and she sees the pathetic melted pile of goo that is Willow's abomination, and once Amity's gone, she has the idea to roll in the goo, make herself look like an abomination, and that way she'll be able to get Willow an A. And also, as the trade-off, get to spend a day at magic school. Like I alluded to it earlier, but she runs off on Ida because she's disappointed in how Ida is handling things. Ida thinks it's more productive to dig through the guts of a giant monster instead of teach loose magic. Like there's a thing about Ida hands her a seed and tells her to hold on to it because it could be worth something or whatever. That does come into play later. But that doesn't mean that Ida knew that that was actually going to come in handy. She was just trying to get loose, excited about digging through monster guts. And so as someone whose background includes nerding out over fantasy literature, of course Luce is going to be interested in the school. In fact, she'd go there if she could. So she and Will hatch this little scheme, and immediately their dynamic is great. It's very well handled. Their dialogue is adorable too strong a word? I don't think so. It's adorable. They're adorable. And her interactions with Willow's friend Augustus, who Luce nicknames Gus, are also adorable. I'm not the biggest fan of Gus's character. I don't hate him either. But I guess I'm kind of indifferent to him. But his interactions with the other characters tend to be pretty sweet. Like, he and Willow in particular are very supportive of each other. And he's also a big fan of humans, So he is super excited to meet Luce and is able to identify that she is a human even while she is disguised as an abomination. Of course, things go wrong, though. For a while, everyone is super impressed with Willow's abomination because Luce is so lifelike, because she's literally alive, right? But Amity, who does not buy that Willow could have turned things around so quickly, causes trouble, and eventually this leads to Luce being more or less found out, and a chase ensues. A whole bunch of shenanigans happen, but in the meantime, that seed that Ida gave to Luce to hang on to, that she pulled out of the guts of that giant slug monster thing, does come into play. Willow is able to use it to make a big plant and then fight with it. Like, there's way more to it than that, but I want you guys to watch the episode, so I'm not going to go into detail. It's all very impressive stuff, and it impresses the school principal, and she gets to switch to the plant track. It's all good. Luce gets banned from the school forever, but that's beside the point, at least for now. There's also some Ida and King shenanigans that happen in the background that are also very funny, but I've already basically spoiled the rest of the episode for you, so I'm not going to spoil that too. It's good stuff. This episode, in fact, is all good stuff. This is a very good episode. In fact, I really like when Ida realizes that Luce has been at Hexside the entire day, and she thinks she might be losing Luce to traditional forms of education. Like, you can tell part of her reaction is because she doesn't like school, but she seems genuinely concerned that she's going to lose Luce. So you can see that she's already started to become taken to the kid. Mostly, though, I don't really have anything else to say about this episode. It's generally solid, but it's mostly here to introduce a bunch of stuff that we're going to get fleshed out later. Hexside is going to be fleshed out more later. These characters are all going to be fleshed out more later, except kind of Gus. Like, we've gotten some expansions of his character, but we haven't really gotten a lot yet, which might be why I'm kind of indifferent to him. I don't know, we'll see as I'm rewatching these. And we already see that the principal is at least open to changing things up if they're for the better, right? Because he switches Willow to the plant track. But I'm really looking forward to seeing if I feel the same way after I've rewatched some upcoming episodes. But seeing as how it does seem like they're trying to use Hexside as a commentary on what's wrong with modern education, some of the changes that get implemented later on, especially considering the kinds of students that the school has had in the past, that we know the school has had in the past, they come a little too easily. It feels like Hexside starts to improve as an institution, but nobody really had to work for it. And like, the U.S. education system is, again, I'm assuming that they're commenting specifically on the U.S. education system here. It needs to be majorly overhauled. Like, that's one of my hot button things, right, is education. Have I ever talked about that before? I don't think I have. I absolutely detest the American education system, and I want to see it reformed. But it's not going to be an easy process. And I feel like it's dishonest implying that it would be. Especially considering the nature of the society as it's revealed later. This is a very oppressive society. But we will talk about that later in upcoming reviews. These reviews are also going to be coming more regularly now. Maybe even more regularly than things like Prime and Titans, just because this show is a little more topical. And I also want to be ready to review the second season. Is there only one season of this so far? The next season, when it comes out, there would be, right? There would only be one season, right? Whatever, you get the point I'm trying to make. Anyway, what did you guys think of the third episode of the Owl House? This one's called I Was a Teenage Abomination, I think, which is a cute title, right? But anyway, what did you think of it if you have seen it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, feel free to get a shipping war started. Do we ship Luce and Amity, or Luce and Willow, or Heck, Willow and Amity, or do we ship all of them? Let's decide. Let's fight it out. In the meantime, though, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.